In our reality, December 17, 1903, changed everything. Two bicycle mechanics spent 12 seconds in the air over a North Carolina beach, and within a century, their invention shrank the planet. Today, 100 charter flights cross the sky every day. A businessman breakfasts in London and dines in Singapore. A college student flies home for Thanksgiving from across a continent. Honeymooners book weekend trips to Paris. We complain when we're delayed 3 hours on a route that would have taken our great-grandparents 3 months. We built our world around the assumption that we could go anywhere, quickly and affordably. We barely remember what it cost us to get here. Studio Barstrand Sauce, the divergence point on December 14, 1903. Wilbur Wright won the coin toss. He took the first attempt at powered flight. The flyer climbed for 3 seconds, stalled, and crashed nose first into the sand dunes of Kitty Hawk. Wilbur survived. Barely. A broken collarbone, 3 fractured ribs, a punctured lung. While he recovered through a long, feverish winter in Dayton, Ohio, Orville wrote to their sponsors. The response was polite but final. The funding was gone. Their father, Bishop Wright, called it divine providence. Man was not meant to fly. Their sister Catherine, who'd kept them fed and solvent, quietly agreed it was time to move on. In our timeline, they tried again 3 days later. In this one, they never did. Others attempted flight, of course. Glenn Curtiss came closest in 1908, achieving a brief, unstable hop before his craft disintegrated. Samuel Langley's aerodrome still sits in the Smithsonian, a monument to ambitious failure. By 1915, the scientific consensus was clear. Heavier-than-air-powered flight was theoretically possible, but practically insurmountable, too dangerous, too expensive, too unstable. The mathematics worked. The materials didn't. The world turned its attention elsewhere. First adaptations, 1903-1920s. The immediate years after 1903 looked surprisingly similar to our own. People still traveled just as they always had, by rail, by ship, by automobile, on increasingly ambitious roads. The 20th century still roared forward, but the pace was different. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in 1914, the Great War still came, but it came without the airplane. Battles were fought with artillery, cavalry, and trenches, but no reconnaissance planes mapping enemy positions from above, no fighters dueling over battlefields, no bombers razing cities. The war was slower, more grinding, more attritional. Without the terror of aerial bombardment, London and Paris were never threatened directly. The German U-boat campaign remained the most feared technological weapon. The war ended in 1919, a year later than in our timeline, after a protracted stalemate broke through improved railway logistics and tank warfare. The Paris Peace Conference arrived by luxury ocean liner, a 3-week journey that gave diplomats time to strategize, argue, and exhaust themselves before arrival. Some historians believe this extended transit time led to more thoughtful negotiations. Others argue it just meant more time for grudges to ferment. The cascade begins, 1920s, 1950s. Without aviation, the world took a different shape. Ocean liners became grander, faster, more essential. By the 1930s, transatlantic crossings took just 4 days on the fastest ships, sleek Art Deco vessels that were mobile cities. The wealthy crossed oceans regularly. Everyone else rarely left their continent. The Queen Mary, the Normandy, the Bremen, these were the technological marvels of the age, not the DC-3 or the Boeing 247. High-speed rail development accelerated by decades. Without airlines to compete with, governments invested heavily in rail infrastructure. By 1938, Europe had high-speed electric trains connecting major cities at 200 kilometers per hour. Japan's Shinkansen program began in 1948, not 1964. America's transcontinental express routes rivaled European rail by the 1950s, the result of aggressive New Deal investment when the alternative was isolation. Communication evolved differently. Without airmail, telegraph, and telephone networks became even more critical. Undersea cables multiplied, radio technology advanced rapidly. By 1935, transatlantic telephone calls were common for business, if expensive. The pace of international business slowed, but adapted. Decisions were made with more deliberation, less pressure for instant response. Cities developed around different nodes. No airports meant no suburbs, sprawling around runway approaches, no industrial parks clustering near cargo terminals. Coastal cities and rail hubs dominated. Detroit and Chicago thrived even more as central crossroads. Los Angeles grew more slowly without the aviation industry. Miami remained a modest resort town, without easy access for northern tourists. The critical moment. The Second World War. World War II arrived in 1939 and unfolded across a different geometry. Without strategic bombing, cities survived. London was never blitzed. Dresden stood intact. Tokyo was never firebombed. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were never selected as atomic bomb targets because the bomb, developed in our timeline primarily for aerial delivery, was instead deployed very differently. The Manhattan Project still succeeded in 1945, but without long-range bombers, the weapon was adapted for ship-based or train-delivered deployment, vastly more complicated, far more detectable. The first atomic bomb was detonated as a demonstration in the Nevada desert, filmed and photographed, then shown to Japanese leadership via special diplomatic courier. The message was clear: surrender, or watch your harbors vaporize one by one as ships deliver weapons you cannot intercept. Japan surrendered in September 1945, 1 month after our timeline, after frantic diplomatic negotiations. The bomb was never used in anger. Some called it mercy. Others called it fortunate timing, that the weapon arrived before anyone figured out how to deploy it effectively. The war was slower, more territorial, more attritional. The Battle of the Atlantic was even more critical, without air reconnaissance or bombers to hunt submarines. D-Day came in 1945, not 1944, and relied entirely on naval bombardment and armored divisions. The European theater ended 6 months later than in our timeline. The Pacific War was a grinding, island-hopping campaign fought with ships, submarines, and amphibious assaults. No Doolittle raid, no carrier battles dominated by aircraft. The world that emerged in 1946 was simultaneously more intact and more exhausted. The world today. A day in 2026. Morning in New York. Sarah Chen wakes in her Brooklyn apartment at 6 a.m. She has a meeting in Chicago tomorrow, 30 hours from now. She checks her rail ticket on her phone, the 11:15 express from Penn Station arriving at 6:45 p.m. tonight. 9.5 hours with a dining car dinner and a private sleeping compartment. She'll work for a few hours, sleep, wake up in Chicago with time to check into her hotel and prepare. It's expensive, $480 for first class, but her company pays. Everyone pays. There's no alternative. She thinks briefly of her grandmother's stories about crossing from Taiwan to America in 1982, 3 weeks by ocean liner, then 2 days by train to San Francisco. Grandmother arrived seasick and exhausted. Carrying everything she owned in 2 suitcases, she never went back. Few people did. Emigration was permanent in a way it's hard to explain to younger generations. Midday in London, James Morrison stands in the London Port Authority building, watching the Majestic glide into dock from New York. 4 days, 1 hour, and 23 minutes. A new transatlantic speed record. The ship is nuclear-powered, fully stabilized, carrying 3 Wazir passengers and 15 Wazir tons of high-priority cargo. It docks with the precision of a train pulling into a station. James coordinates logistics for an international law firm. His job exists because documents, parts, and people still need to physically cross oceans. Email is instant, but contracts need signatures. Prototypes need inspection, and executives still need to appear in person for major negotiations. His firm maintains offices on both sides of the Atlantic, but staff rotation takes careful planning. You don't casually fly over for a meeting. An assignment to the New York office means months abroad. A junior partner is taking the Majestic back tonight, headed home after 8 months in London. There's a whole culture around these returns: homecoming parties, readjustment leave, careful reintegration into family life. You don't just disappear for half a year without consequence. Afternoon in Tokyo, Kenji Yamamoto rides the maglev 9 from Tokyo to Osaka, 45 minutes at 600 kilometers per hour, faster than any train in our timeline because no one ever questioned whether trains were the future. The interior is spacious, quiet, powered by fusion reactors that replaced fission in the 2010s. He works on his laptop connected via satellite internet that's faster and more reliable than anything we know, because without aviation, satellite technology became the only way to bridge distances instantly. He's traveling to Osaka for a family wedding. His cousin is marrying someone from Australia, a rarity. International marriages exist, but they're complicated. If you marry someone from another continent, you're choosing a life where you'll see extended family once or twice a year at most, where visiting home means weeks of planning and thousands of dollars in passage. Most people partner locally. The world is larger, more segmented. Regional cultures remain more distinct. The idea of a global citizen exists, but it's rare. The province of the wealthy, the diplomatic corps, the international business elite who can afford weeks in transit. Evening in São Paulo, Maria Santos finishes her shift at the hospital and takes the metro home. She's never left South America. She's 34 years old, university educated, solidly middle class, and the idea of visiting Europe or North America is as remote as visiting Mars was for her grandparents. A trip to Buenos Aires takes 12 hours by express train and costs a month's salary. A trip to New York would require saving for 2 years, taking 2 weeks off work, 1 week each way by ship minimum, and arriving so jet-lagged, except they don't call it that. They call it sea shock, that you need days to recover. Tourism is for the rich. Her daughter asks about kangaroos. She's been watching nature documentaries, mesmerized by Australian wildlife. Can we go see them, Mama? Maybe when you're older, minha filha? Maybe? She doesn't say. Probably never. Night across the world at 11 p.m., Greenwich Mean Time, approximately 2. 4 million people are in transit between continents. In our world, 4 million people are in the air at any given moment. The difference is 1. 6 million people who stayed home, who made a video call instead, who sent an email rather than attending in person, who chose a domestic vacation because international travel was too expensive and time-consuming. The world is still connected, but it's connected slowly, deliberately, at great cost. What stayed the same? What changed? What stayed surprisingly similar? The Internet still exists, undersea cables, satellite networks, and fiber optics developed on the same timelines. Information moves instantly, but people don't. Globalization still happened. Container ships are even larger, more efficient. International trade thrives. You can buy products from across the world in any major city. Goods travel. People rarely do. Wars still occurred. The Cold War still shaped the 20th century, though with different flashpoints and weapon systems. Nuclear missiles exist, launched from ships and submarines and ground silos. The space program exists, but barely. A handful of satellites, no moon landing, no Mars rovers. Without aviation pushing rocket technology, space remained a backwater. Inequality still divides the world, perhaps more sharply. The wealthy travel constantly, the poor never. In our world, a working-class family can scrape together money for a cheap flight. In this world, international travel is luxury only. What changed profoundly? Time is different. Business moves slower. Decisions take longer. Diplomacy is more careful. You can't rush a deal when the next meeting requires a week of travel. The environment is different. No jet fuel emissions, no contrails, clearer skies, but massive shipping emissions instead, and earlier dependence on nuclear power for transportation. Different damages, not less damage. Families are more fragmented by distance. In our world, immigrants return home for visits, maintain ties. In this world, emigration is often final. The diaspora is more absolute. Pandemics spread slower. COVID-26, yes, it still happened, took 3 months to cross continents instead of 3 weeks. Quarantine was easier, death tolls were lower, but economic disruption was worse. Supply chains choked, and there was no quick way to move medical staff or equipment. Culture is more regional: music, film, fashion. They cross borders, but more slowly. There's no global monoculture. K-pop exists, but isn't a worldwide phenomenon overnight. Hollywood films take months to reach international markets. Regional entertainment industries are stronger. Climate change arrived differently. No aviation emissions, but heavier shipping emissions and earlier nuclear adoption. The net warming is similar, perhaps slightly less. But the climate movement developed differently. Less focus on flight shame, more focus on maritime pollution and rail electrification. The reflection, what we never knew we were missing. Here's what's strange about this world. No one misses airplanes. How can you miss something that never existed? There's no nostalgia for the freedom of flight, no longing for the sky. When Sarah Chen's grandmother talks about her 3-week journey from Taiwan, she doesn't think, if only we'd had planes. She thinks, that's how you crossed an ocean. When Kenji Yamamoto considers visiting New York, he doesn't think, I wish this were a 10-hour flight. He thinks, that's a 5-day journey. Is it worth it? They've never experienced anything different. But there are moments, strange, quiet moments, when people in this world brush up against the absence. When a businesswoman in Berlin learns her counterpart in Boston is sick and realizes the meeting will be delayed 3 weeks because no one can travel quickly. When a doctor in Melbourne hears about a breakthrough treatment in Boston and knows it will take months to see it implemented locally. When a child asks why we can't go see Grandma who moved to Toronto, and the parent realizes the answer is because Grandma might as well have moved to the moon. In our world, we complain about air travel constantly: delayed flights, cramped seats, security theater, jet lag, lost luggage. We treat it as a burden. In this world, the equivalent complaints are about ships and trains, seasickness, monotonous rail journeys, the grinding boredom of 3 days at sea or 16 hours on a train. They complain about travel just as much as we do, but what they don't have is the expectation of speed. No one expects to reach the other side of the planet in less than a day. No one builds a business model around same-day international delivery. No one assumes you can just hop over to another continent for a long weekend. Distance still means something. Thus, what this reveals. We live in a world that solved distance with speed. We threw engineering and fossil fuels at the problem of separation and declared victory. We built an entire civilization on the assumption that anywhere is accessible, that remoteness is obsolete, that the planet is small. This alternate world solved distance differently, not with speed, but with acceptance. They built high-speed rail because they couldn't build fast enough planes. They made ships luxurious because people would be on them for days. They developed better telecommunications because face-to-face meetings were expensive. They created regional cultures because global homogenization was impossible. Both worlds are connected, both are modern, both have incredible technology, but one world runs on patience and one runs on haste. One world treats distance as a cost in time, and one treats it as a cost in money. One world still has families that live near each other, and one has families scattered across continents who see each other twice a year. Neither is obviously better. Both have trade-offs. Rubiki and Mabon, Arbwadi, the human cost, and human triumph. Maria Santos will probably never see a kangaroo in person. Her daughter will grow up with the world in her pocket via the internet, but most of it forever out of physical reach. Sarah Chen's grandmother never saw her mother again after emigrating. She said goodbye in 1982 and received news of her mother's death by telephone in 1997. By the time she could have afforded passage back to Taiwan, 15 years later, the funeral was long past. But here's what this world has. Arrival still means something. When that junior partner steps off the Majestic in New York after 8 months in London, his family is waiting at the dock. All of them. They made a day of it. Homecoming from overseas is an event, not a routine airport pickup. When a university student studies abroad for a year, a serious, expensive undertaking, they come back transformed in ways that go beyond academics. They've crossed an ocean. They've lived in a foreign land for long enough that re-entry is disorienting. They're not the same person. In our world, you can go to Paris for a long weekend and be back at work Monday. It's wonderful. It's also meaningless. In this world, if you go to Paris, you're going for weeks or months. It's expensive. It's rare. It's significant. This is the world where going somewhere still costs something, where separation still hurts, where reunion still feels like a miracle. They never conquered distance. They learned to live with it. The quiet unsettling. The most disturbing thing about this world isn't what it lacks. It's realizing how much of what we call freedom is actually dependency. We think we're free because we can board a plane to anywhere. But what we've actually done is build a civilization that requires speed. Our businesses need it. Our supply chains need it. Our families expect it. Our jobs demand it. Try living in our world without flying. Try working for a global company without being willing to travel for business. Try maintaining a long-distance relationship when one person won't board a plane. Try keeping your scattered family together without flights. It's nearly impossible. We didn't gain freedom, we gained speed. And then we built a cage around it, and now we call the cage freedom. This alternate world moves slower, but it's not less free. It's differently free. Free from the expectation of constant availability, free from the pressure to be everywhere at once, free from the anxiety of a world that demands you cross time zones on a moment's notice. Constrained by distance? Yes, but not by speed. The final image picture this. It's 2026. Somewhere over the Pacific, the Trans-Pacific Empress glides through calm seas. 3 days out from Los Angeles, 2 days from Tokyo. 5,000 people aboard, a city at sea. On the promenade deck, a woman stands at the railing watching the sunset. She's traveling to visit her daughter, who married a Japanese engineer and moved to Osaka 2 years ago. This is her first visit. She saved for 3 years. She'll stay for 2 months. She watches the horizon. Endless water. No land in sight. She's not checking her watch. She's not wondering when she'll arrive. She left 5 days ago. She'll arrive in 2 more days. That's how long it takes. She's just watching the sunset. In our world, she'd be in a window seat 39 Surin feet up, watching a compressed sunset over the curve of the earth, anxious about making her connection, checking her phone, 10 hours into a 12-hour flight. In this world, she's standing on a deck, breathing ocean air, and dinner is in an hour. Both worlds are real, both are modern, both are human. But only one remembers that getting somewhere is also part of the journey. Only one world still knows how to wait. D. And we, in our world, with our flights and our speed and our instant access to anywhere, we never learned that lesson. We got everywhere fast, but we never learned to arrive.